All right, it looks like we're all back. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. I thought it was so fantastic. So thank you to Rule of Thirds. That was delicious. Before we get started, I wanted to start with a really exciting announcement. So we've been kind of building up over the last several months of, we're having rallies for tomorrow, and we're meeting up once a month, and we're having these frank conversations about sustainability. And then today we've got all of these beautiful learnings from Haresh, from Kelsey, from this wonderful panel that I'm about to introduce you to here. And it's all building up to what we want to see as actual change in your communities, in your bars, in your restaurants. So we are about to make a bigger announcement, but this is the first time we're announcing it today, that we have $50,000 up for grabs for people who want to make a change in your bar, make a change in your community. You can apply to it for us. We're going to have the application details out soon, and this group of people in this room will be the first ones to know about it. But we're going to make a decision, maybe one grant, maybe several grants. We're not sure how that $50,000 is going to be split up. It's really up to you all to apply to us and tell us how we should be spending it, but that's going to be coming soon. So that leads us into this panel discussion. So what this is meant to be is a problem-solving discussion. This is meant to get your creative juices flowing, get you inspired for this $50,000 grant, and really work through some tough issues. So we'd love to see as many hands up as possible. We've got one person, Cam, so bear with them as they're kind of walking around the room, but they're going to have the mic, and so if you can ask questions into the mic, that would be great. Then everybody can hear you, and the video can hear you and all of that, because we're going to be showing this online for people all over the country so that they can also get caught up and apply for that $50,000 grant. With that being said, I would like to introduce you to the panel. Let me get there. Okay, so first I'd like to introduce you to Nama Tamir, somebody that everybody in here already knows. Nama is the owner-operator of Lighthouse in Brooklyn, and she has been our gracious host for all of the rallies for tomorrow and the meetups every month. She's also just everywhere doing everything, whether she's hosting a rally for tomorrow or sitting on a sustainability panel for the James Beard Foundation. She's one of the most important voices in how to actually implement sustainable measures into your bar or your restaurant. And not just sustainability in terms of recycling, water waste, food waste management, those sorts of things, but human sustainability and what it actually means to have a staff that in almost 15 years you have practically zero turnover. So we'll have a chance to talk to her about that today. Next to her, we have Francisca Troutman. She has an honors graduate with chemical engineering from Tulane University and is the co-founder and CEO of Glass Half Full. At Glass Half Full, their mission is to recycle glass into sand for coastal restoration and more. It's a really exciting initiative. She's based in New Orleans, and a lot of what they'll do is take glass, crush it up, make sandbags out of it for hurricane season. But I'll let her explain a little bit more on it, but it's very exciting and an amazing example of what you can do if you were like, I don't want to apply for something for my bar, but I do want to apply for something for my community. This is a perfect example of something that is really meant to benefit the community. She's going to be a great asset in this conversation as we dive into all things repurposing, recycling, upcycling, and just all around problem solving with sustainability. And we have Edja Arzos. I did it, said it right. She is the Director of Sustainability for David Energy, which partners with businesses on better energy solutions through their unique platform. She'll be our voice of reason when it comes to all things energy and water waste in today's discussion. And then we have a person here that a lot of you already know as well. This is Jackie Summers. Jackie, yep. Jackie is an acclaimed author, seasoned public speaker, and serial entrepreneur. He is the founder of Jack from Brooklyn and is the creator of the award-winning Sorrel liqueur and is the first Black distiller in the United States. He also sits on our board of directors at Another Round, Another Rally, and he's a very integral part of our growth and our team. And Jackie can not only speak today about how to run a sustainable business, but also he can help us navigate a conversation of community sustainability and the importance it plays in this global conversation. So let's get started. Now, I want to reiterate that please, hands up as soon as you can if you have ideas that are something that you really want to work on in your bar, but you just don't think you can get through it. But I'm going to just start here with sort of a general question to the entire panel. If you think about it, what is the most impactful change or improvement you have created in your work? Anyone want to go first?
So we opened Lighthouse almost 13 years ago with the absolute intention of changing the paradigm of what it means to be a sustainable restaurant in the most urban city I ever had the pleasure of living in. And working in this industry for so long, I knew that there were so many different angles and so many things that I wanted to change. One of the most important one was the dichotomy between front of the house and back of the house, how they were treated and paid and so forth. I think sustainability has three main sort of veins of existence. The environmental one that gets a lot of headlines, the human one that unfortunately is not yet in the forefront of what everyone is thinking about, and the financial one, because at the end of the day, we can be very sustainable but not make a living, and the restaurant would have to close. So taking all of those things into consideration and just moving one thing at a time. So one of the first things we tackled was waste and finding different partners to help us eliminate as much waste as possible. And in that sense, the most sustainable thing we've ever done is build a community that, one, supported us, and secondly, just allowed us to do all this great work. We were not able to divert as much food from landfill. We would not be able to be as local as in terms of sourcing, and we would not able to survive all this time, especially a pandemic. And so that community building is the thing that is allowing all of these amazing changes happen over time and sustain themselves and sustain us and sustain our staff in a really respectable way, and allow us to hold on to staff in a really long-term goals, and keep on changing and keep on moving and not being afraid. There's really all these people that are there to catch us when need to. And again, the pandemic was a huge proof of that. And there's just so many things to talk about sustainability, but I want everyone else to have a chance. So moving on to you.
Sure, thank you. So as you mentioned, Glass Half Full started with the goal of recycling glass in Louisiana. So before 2020, when I co-founded Glass Half Full, we didn't have any glass recycling. And so in a way, that's probably the biggest impact I've made in terms of what I've done in the community. But I think also just being able to show people that if you see a problem and you want to solve it, there is a way to do it. So Glass Half Full started in a backyard while I was still a student in college. And you can ask me as whatever questions you want, how we funded it, how we learned everything, Google. And I can give you an answer and show you that it's possible with community effort and grassroots organizing to solve a problem as big as not having recycling for an entire waste stream. And so I think that's probably, to answer your question, one of the biggest impacts I think I've had is showing other people that that's possible. And so if you see a problem that you want to solve, being able to organize as a community and make that happen if you want to.
Hi, everyone. So I work at David Energy, and I think one of the biggest impacts that I had was to be part of David Energy. It was founded in 2019 to be the new kind of electricity provider to change how we see electricity and how we source electricity. Our co-founders, James McGinnis and Ahmed Salman, started the company, and we provide electricity to small to medium businesses like restaurants, bars, as well as commercial buildings, multifamily buildings, and residential clients. We serve the areas New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Texas. And this is just the phase one. This is the beginning. We're planning on getting bigger in the future. And what differentiates us from the other electricity providers out there is we connect to your HVAC systems in your restaurants, and we install smart thermostats where you can manage your HVAC and reduce your energy consumption, reduce your operational costs, and also when the grid is stressed, we can enroll you in demand response programs, and by participating in those programs, you can reduce your energy consumption when the grid is very stressed, and then by doing that, you get an incentive money, as well as helping the New York City to better manage its electricity generating plants and reduce the potential of turning peaker plants, the fossil fuel plants, and yeah, that's where I will stop.
So I think my contribution biggest has been education. The joke I tell is I'm a community organizer who stumbled into owning a liquor brand. I was co-chair of the education committee. I was co-chair of the education committee for Tulsa Cocktail for 3 years. I was co-chair of the education committee for Bar Comfort in Brooklyn for 3 years. I've been involved with the James Beard House for the last 6. We had the first ever all-black seminar. We had the first ever all-Latino seminar. We had the first ever all-queer seminar.
Yes,
We had the
yes.
first ever seminar just on pronouns. I currently sit on the Vibe Council. I'm still involved with the Beard House. I'm involved with the Bar Restaurant Expo. My job is to try to, anytime people want to have difficult conversations about how to be inclusive, my phone rings. That's why I get called.
Right. Which we have called you for that very conversation before. And I just remember when we did that, I remember there was a young lady in that conversation who said, I feel guilty because I'm, this white girl in this town and this thing, and she was going on in the story, and you just put your hand on her shoulder and said, nobody's here to make anyone feel guilty. That's not what this is. It's a tough conversation already to have. So I can see why your phone always gets called on that. Okay, so question number 2. Let's start with, do you want to start this one? What would you like to change but have not been able to? What are the barriers that you see?
Ooh. That's a good question. So I guess a little background on kind of the waste landscape in New Orleans. So it's a huge touristy city. I'm sure you've all been there for some sort of bachelorette party or Tales of the Cocktail. But we don't have a lot of sustainability infrastructure. And so I think where that comes into play a lot is that people will move there, or they'll come to visit, or they'll come for a conference or something, and they'll say, oh, how is XYZ not here? And I think something I'd like to see change is the culture around sustainability in a place like New Orleans, in Louisiana, in the South, and also the view of that many people have of the South in terms of us not caring or not wanting to change that, because we do. I think we're just dealing with hurricanes and other things a lot of the time. And so I think having a more inclusive conversation of how we change everyone's mindset around sustainability and how to do that sustainably, as opposed to these blanket solutions that we see a lot in when people come into a community and say, we want to see XYZ, which is why we were honored to partner for Tales of the Cocktail to recycle the glass as a local, glass waste provider, as opposed to maybe going to WM or someone else larger and saying, let's recycle all of the waste for this. So I think a more inclusive conversation in terms of New Orleans and changing the sustainability landscape in the South.
Yeah, and just to catch you guys up on what Francisca just said, basically Pernod Ricard partnered with Glass Half Full on all of their parties at Tales of the Cocktail this year. So every piece of glass that could be recycled from any Pernod party was picked up by Glass Half Full and is now being turned into sandbags or some other way to support the coastline there. Yeah, it's fantastic. Would anyone else like to answer that question? And I'll reiterate it to you. What would you change but have not been able to? And what are the barriers?
Equal pay across genders.
Yes.
Mentorship for marginalized communities. Career paths for marginalized communities. Ownership. I want to see more people that look like the people at this table own something. I want to see a high rate of investment for those owners. And I want to end sexual harassment in our establishments.
Yes, yes, yes.
One thing that I would like to change would be to bring sustainability on top of everyone's agenda rather than the bottom. Sometimes I think people overlook at the benefits, both cost benefits and environmental benefits that would come from investing in energy and water-related technologies. So making that priority and understanding the value that it brings, I think is tremendous.
I want to change so many things in our industry. And the biggest barrier is truly the cost of it. Our menu prices and our industries are not structured to provide a good living for our staff, to be able to buy the best of ingredients, to be able to invest in regenerative agriculture. And we're constantly kind of moving on this line of trying to be affordable, trying to pay people really well, getting the best ingredients, caring for our waste. And the change that needs to happen for all of us to be available is a global one, right? Like we all have to together figure out these new systems and these new ways and potentially a new price structure to be able to implement all these changes.
One of the things that I would actually like to see change is a little bit more profit sharing in restaurants. And I know specifically you and Ahmed do that. And I'm curious if you could share what that has been like for you. I mean, the level of turnover that you have from doing something like that, just what that experience is.
People don't work for bosses, they work for a cause. They work for something that they love. And I think the first thing that our staff overall feels is that we truly care about what we're doing. We're really committed to the cause and to them individually. And a few years ago, we've decided that once we hit our cost of running Lighthouse on a weekly basis, we will share the revenue with our cooks. And so they have a higher, in general, I would say a higher hourly wage, but being able to share profits just means that we can pay them as long as the restaurant is doing well. So that allows us the flexibility of not committing to something that we can't do, that again, over time would essentially put us in too big of a financial kind of commitment to be able to stay open. But when the restaurant does well, if we're doing catering, if we had a great week, for whatever reason, the restaurant was just really, really busy, it's not just the front of the house staff that gets to go home with a nice chunk of change, but the cooks also get to feel it. So there's a mutual interest that causes everyone to work really well together, and everyone feels properly compensated. And again, at the same time, we're not committing to something that we cannot do year round.
Yeah, and one of the things that struck me about this particular business model is that in terms of your bottom line, you have such little turnover in the kitchen that what you would have spent like constantly retraining new people coming into the kitchen is sort of equal to what you've spent in sharing the profits and keeping your staff engaged. I love it. Does anyone have any questions before we move on to another question here? Yeah. Sorry, Kamakacha.
So you're profit sharing with the kitchen on a weekly basis.
Yes.
So how do you account for, your longer term needs in terms of like unexpected costs that might come up? Do you have a higher weekly cost that you're trying to hit and then you kind of squirrel some of that money away, or what? Can you explain that?
Absolutely. You nailed it. It's exactly what we're doing. And just like your finances, you should always have emergency funds. We have emergency funds for Lighthouse. So we are constantly making sure that is there when we need it. If we have a really terrible week, it doesn't mean that we're paying less in that week for the hourly, but over time that fund grows and we can really do that without worrying too much.
Got one over there.
I think Nama really touched on this already, but it's pretty much implied among the entire panel. It's very cost prohibitive to do sustainability in restaurants. I've spoken to a lot of restaurant owners, not in New York City, but actually a couple in New York City, but also in Westchester County. Those that are sustainability conscious and those that aren't sustainability conscious. So I'm interested in touching and going a lot deeper into that, at least maybe for a couple of minutes, because there are a lot of new technologies, and I am going to give some names. There's LeanPath, there's LeanPath, there is Spot Hopper, and so Spot Hopper is for marketing, and a lot of people that I've spoken to have very openly told me the payback period is too long, or that the benefits just don't outweigh the costs. So if we want to reduce waste, it's just too much for us. And so I want to go a little bit deeper into how can we make sustainability more affordable, if not simpler. If LeanPath is not the option, then what alternatives are there?
I can start
Yeah.
with that. So I think sometimes we're all looking for that $1 million idea that's going to make every single problem go away or solve every single energy and sustainability related problems we have. I would recommend to start where you are. And sometimes those small changes that you start implementing in your space end up giving you the biggest turnovers. Like, I'm a big believer of you can manage what you can measure. So starting by just simply looking at your utility bills and understanding how much energy you're consuming in your space or how much water you're consuming in your space would make a big difference. Like, we all have smartphones, smart appliances, smart apartments. So kind of applying that into your restaurant space, your workspace, and installing smart thermostats would give you bigger insights into how much energy you're consuming in your space. And you would be surprised how much you could save by just changing the set points and or like by tracking water, by installing more water meters in your space, how much you could reduce your water waste by pinpointing the leakages earlier than usual. You could save a lot of money. So start where you are, take small steps that will turn into bigger projects that you can implement in your space. And also, I mentioned the demand response programs. I'm originally from Istanbul, Turkey, and like it was very normal when I was growing up there that we would use electricity in the given hours of the day, and it was so normalized. I would just like light a candle or take out the torches. We were all prepared for it. But in a city like New York City in 2023, I don't think we can deal with not having electricity for a couple of hours. So it's really important to work with the city and the utilities and commit to participating in these programs where you can reduce your load when the grid is the most stressed, which would also reduce your greenhouse gas emissions overall because you would avoid using electricity when it's its dirtiest.
It's the reason why we are all here right now. It's the reason why Pernod Ricard and Another Round, Another Rally are putting these events together. It's to help us have these conversations and build these systems. It's really hard to do something by yourself. There is a cost premium, but the whole idea of bringing this industry together is that we can all sit in these rooms and problem solve together and look at what does treating our waste together as a community, how much cheaper can that be? What if we looked at purchasing? There's so many things that you can do, and I know I sort of repeat myself with that word of community, but we need to make these big investments together, and we need to have these conversations together, and we need to potentially lobby, and some of these things are on a legislation level, and a lot of these things are cultural. We need to have conversation with our guests about the what it means to be eating seasonally, and so that commitment to doing things over time, it's not going to happen tomorrow, and it is either a financial investment or a time investment. But I can tell you as a restaurant that maybe the first thing we did was work with the Billion Oyster Project that is now incredibly well known, to now having maybe 7 partners that pick up corks and glass and these different things. So over time, talking about it, talking about our mission, making these partnerships, showing up to events like this, and really taking advantage of these opportunities to invest and learn and figure out that technology will allow all of it to be cheaper over time. And this is the opportunity to talk about these things so that we can scale it over time.
Yeah, I think also one thing to consider too, because we're talking about money, right, and how it is related to this. How are we actually going to make this work? And there are a lot of studies that show that consumers really like to put their money at a place with a cause. And I'll just give you an example. Our friend Kate Gerwin has a place called Happy Accidents in New Mexico, and she started paying her employees $15 an hour, which in New Mexico is quite a bit over the minimum wage. And they were just thriving. And some place down the street, they just raised the minimum wage a little bit, and they put a big sign on the door and were like, we have to close because minimum wage has been raised. Somebody took a picture of that sign and took a picture of the line going down the street at Kate's and put it on Reddit, and was like, well, meanwhile, down at Happy Accidents, where they're actually paying their employees $15 an hour, there's a line down the street. And it's because people want to put their money where they know people are being taken care of, or the environment is being taken care of. And I think you really hit on something here in terms of legislation, and sometimes it takes lobbying. Every state, it's like the Wild West out there. Every state has different laws. In Arizona, for example, they almost practically make it illegal for you to recycle glass, right? It's like, just the way the laws are written there, it is very, very difficult to actually recycle the glass. Like, you have to store it in a parking lot, and so you have to have enough space in your parking lot for that storage, and there has to be a special company that comes by once a week to legally do it, and it gets very, very hard. But Arizona is also a place that's constantly in a drought. And if you understood that, like, okay, every night that we burn the ice in our well, that's 5 bathtubs full of water that we're basically putting down the drain, then you can sort of conceptualize, okay, every bar in the city is doing that every night, 5 bathtubs full of water each. Maybe that's the battle. Maybe it's not right away the glass battle. Maybe it's the water battle. But there's something in there that you can do.
So I'm going to back up both of those points and say, if you show me your budget, I'll show you your priorities. It is entirely true that there is no short-term benefit to the kind of changes that we're talking about making. But if we don't make those changes long term, then there's not going to be anything to change. There's not going to be anything left. So we have to be able to sit back and go, what does this look like beyond the next 3 years? The nature of consumption is changing. The kids, and by the kids I mean Gen Z, can drink now. And the kids are conscious consumers. Mm-hmm. The kids grew up in a post 9/11 world. The kids grew up in the post Sandy Hook world. The kids grew up with active shooter drills. The kids aren't sure if the world's going to be here when their kids are kids. And they want to see sustainable programming in place. And that is something that you can actually market. It can be profitable, not in the immediate, but in the long run. So there is a business activation, there's a community activation, and there's a personal activation. And I'm going to back up what was said here before, and that's your vote counts. The people you vote for actually make a difference. My sister's environmental law, and she just had a law passed into effect that will go into she just had a law passed that will go into effect in 2026 that will require all buildings in Manhattan that aren't being occupied during the day, that are not being occupied at night, to turn off their lights. Because what do we need all those lights for? It's going to save the city so much money, cut down on so much light pollution, and just increase. And all it took was someone going, here's an easy way we can do this.
Yeah.
If the people who voted for it actually want this change. So from a community level, from a business level, and from a personal level, there's all things we can do. And you have to be willing to say, we've enjoyed short-term benefit for a long time. If we don't take some short-term suffering, we're all going to lose out.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. You know, I've been listening to like everyone conversations and you guys' point of view, which is like really interesting because they come from like a different perspective, but they all land in the same way. And the way that I see this whole thing about being sustainable is like a lifestyle, you know? And as a human, we enjoy things that are more like effortless. That way we take it more personal, that way we go through it without feeling like attacked. I feel like from the restaurant perspective, we have to think about the whole system as a business, and then through the business you apply ideas and make changes to be like sustainable on the way to it. You cannot be sustainable and then go to a crazy process because you helping the planet, and then you cannot pay the workers that went through that process, you know?
Right.
It have to be a combination, like the things go like that, and they are absolutely clear, and I feel like it's been more precise. I feel like, for example, people have this urge to be recognized that sometimes at work, the best bartender is the one that came 3 hours earlier and make 125 course of lime. But this day, we only have 10 covers, you know? And then owners, sometimes they're not so related to food and they see the restaurant just as a business model, that those people looking for recognition, but at the same time, this lime go to waste. Oh, I don't care. I don't pay for them, you know? And being more conscious and work in base of precisement, at the same time, develop people more creativity, you know? Make an special, do something, because if that ingredient is going slow and is only used for one cocktail, add it up in something else. Make French 75 with peach or something, because people are not drinking peach by the end of the season. It's more about going to the natural process of things and then implement those twists that can make you sustainable instead of work really hard or not be kind to your workers because you want to make you creative stuff. Because as a customer perspective, I really like how things taste, and then I appreciate the process. And then I feel like now many bartenders are doing so much of a process to find recognition, not thinking about the customers and then the profitable way of like, you know, like rules are there for a reason. If you want to break them, you need to make them simpler and more efficient, not just break so many rules just for the fact of want to be different. More purpose in the things that we do.
So for those of you who are up there who own businesses, then how do you, with that in mind, acknowledging that we're not always looking and seeing sustainability in how we build recognition, how we build culture, how do you all build culture in your organizations that kind of comprehensively brings sustainability into how every decision is made?
Well, I'll start with that one. I work for a very small company. There's just 3 people on payroll, and we have 1 intern. And we kind of, work all over the country. And so one of the things that we do is, like CAM, for example, we have key volunteers in each market so that we can kind of eliminate too much travel. That's a big sustainability thing. But also, there are certain things that we've implemented in terms of sustainability at work within the employees there. 2 of the 3 people who work there are the co-founders of the company, so we're in pretty good shape of one of us not quitting, But we still know that hospitality really starts from within. It's how you treat each other. And so we have a certain number of things that we do there. For example, Nama and I were just talking about this earlier. Travis is a very thoughtful person when he's speaking, and he takes time to collect his thoughts, and I'm a really horrible interrupter. And so I tend to bowl him over in meetings and finish his sentences and stuff. And I have just really recently, maybe a couple years ago, I just decided to remind myself how damn rude that is and just stop doing it. And I won't say that I'm perfect at it, but I really make an active effort just to not interrupt him. The other thing is that we just decided from the beginning, as soon as we became a company, that the idea was going to be the king or the queen. And so it's something where we know that in idea days, which Travis and I have an ideation session every single day. And then we have ideation sessions as a team twice a week. And we just know that there's no bad ideas in there. There's no quick, no, that's not going to work. We all kick around the ideas for a while. And a lot of times we get to know that's not going to work. But we make sure that everybody within the company has a safe space to be sharing their ideas. And that's just one of the ways that we kind of try to practice that hospitality from within.
Science. Please.
At Lighthouse, we don't actually have managers. We hire people that truly care about what they're doing, and we treat them like professionals. And rather than constantly telling them what to do, we take the time to teach a culture. We talk about values, we talk about goals, we have a lot of patience, and we try to make reminders, and we want the people to stay with us for a long time, and because they believe in what they're doing. It also allows, going back to a previous question, it also allows for a little bit more financial stability. So some of that money that would be paid to a manager or a micromanager can now go to people that might need a little bit more, right? Front of the house can make $50 and $60 an hour. It's never the case for the back of the house. But being able to have a team that just really understands the bigger conversation, the bigger purpose, that don't need to be told what to do. And whether myself or my brother, who's my partner, are there or not, they are the same. They care about what the place means to each other, what it means to the cooks, what it means to the community at large. And we can take a vacation together, and the place runs pretty much the same way. And that just takes time and investment and knowing what you want to achieve. And I think in a sense also was born out of kind of not knowing what we're doing. My brother and I started, and I had never managed a restaurant in my life, and the learning curve was huge. And so instead of kind of building on everything that already existed in the industry that I may have seen in other places, we would try something out and then pivot if it doesn't work. And again, it's kind of like that brave instinct to go for something and not be afraid to say, oh, well, that didn't work, so we won't do that again. But it really just comes from this place of love and really believing in what we're doing and finding the right people along for the ride. And, you know, there are a lot of different kind of employees, and they could all be wonderful, and they are not always the right ones for you. So being able to have that tough but loving conversation to say, you're someone that needs to have someone manage you, and this is just not the right place, but I'm happy to help something else. And I think that makes the people that do stick around, one, feel appreciated and respected, right? You can have that culture when not everyone participates, but also acknowledging that people are wonderful whether they are your people or not. Mm-hmm. And that just really is a commitment that over time happens. And when there is that pivotal moment where your staff becomes those teachers, and they are the ones teaching the new generation what that means in that particular environment.
Listen, as a spirits producer, my environmental footprint is terrible. It's awful. I've got botanicals coming from 3 different continents. I've got glass coming from 2 different continents. So one of the things that I did was last year hire a food scientist, and one of his charges was, how do we make this more sustainable? Because what we're doing at the end of the day isn't going to help if we don't have a world left to do it in. So with the help of my food scientist, Dr. Wedler, the product has become much more sustainable. We have changed our process. We have changed how we actually examine the vendors that we deal with to make sure that workers are being treated in an equitable way. We even changed our glass manufacturer from somewhere that is much, much closer, much smaller environmental footprint. It costs more. And when you're dealing with in millions of bottles of glass, like a 2 cent increase in your glass over millions of bottles adds up. But it's also nice to have a world to live in that's not on fire. So there's that.
Okay, I have a question. I think that this is all kind of nicely going into this next question. So this question is about failure. I think that we're all afraid of failure for all of the reasons. Your reputation is on the line, your finances are on the line. But I've always found in big moments of failure where I'm sort of licking my paws in the corner and wishing whatever happened wouldn't have happened, I later look back and think, wow, that was an invaluable learning experience. So I'm curious about moments that you've had where you've tried to implement change and failed, and what you might have learned from that.
So I'm pretty sure I failed more than anyone here on the table. And I mean that in all seriousness. Trying to take a home recipe and turn it into a shelf-stable product, 623 failures in my kitchen to get it right. I had a national contract signed in 2015 that they reneged on, and a second contract worth millions of dollars that they signed in 2016 that was reneged on. Failure, I was homeless for a year and a half. And I will never forget, scratching for pennies so I could get car fare to meetings with these liquor billionaires to talk about investment. Everyone says you learn from your failures, and nobody talks about their failures. So I try to be very, very upfront with the fact that, yeah, you're going to fail. And the question is, what are you going to do then? Because you have options. There are some failures that will knock you out of the game completely. You got to try to avoid those. And there are some failures that you have to build on. We are taught these aphorisms, and we don't question them. And one of the aphorisms that I always questioned was the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again. Like, if I don't do it over again, how am I going to know how to do it better?
Right.
Like, you have to keep doing these things if you're going to improve on them. So the thing I'll say about failure is take good notes. Take good notes so you know why you failed, how to fail better next time. Because if you're going to fail a lot, get it the fuck out the way fast so you can speed up how quickly you get to success.
And speaking of that, like speeding up how quickly you can get to success, when you were talking about earlier mentorship can give you a really sustainable career. Mentorship can a lot of times be the key to getting you from here to retirement and a number of successes in the way. And one of the ways that I like to look at mentorship is that it can get what might have taken you 10 years before with a great mentor might only take you 7, something like that. So
I don't necessarily usually call this a failure. I call it a pivot, nice reframing. But Glass Half Full started in February of 2020. And we obviously, the whole goal was to recycle glass. And so we created this business model based on recycling glass from bars and restaurants. And what happened in March 2020 in New Orleans is that all of our bars and restaurants closed, and suddenly this whole customer base that we thought would be the core of our business to recycle glass was gone. And we could have looked at it as more of a failure, but we decided to pivot to targeting individuals, which ended up being an incredible way for Glass Half Full to grow, because what was everyone doing March of 2020? At home drinking. And suddenly realizing how much glass waste they were producing just on their own. I mean, truly, maybe it was just a New Orleans thing, but 30 bottles of wine a month, one a day. Yes, and it started stacking up in people's kitchens, and suddenly they were saying, holy shit, I'm producing so much glass waste just on my own. I can't even imagine what the city is producing. And that suddenly gave us this incredible customer base of people who were now these glass warriors of wanting to be able to recycle their glass waste. And that permeated throughout our city once places started opening up. Suddenly the bartenders who were at home and became our customers were now trying to get glass recycling in their restaurants. And it just permeated throughout our community and allowed us to grow in ways I don't think we would have if we had just targeted bars and restaurants, because in a lot of ways that's a more hidden version of glass recycling. People don't necessarily see that. But when you're at home and you're recycling your own glass, you see how much waste can add up. So,
Yeah, that's cool.
I wouldn't also call it a failure, but when I had a big misconception about sustainability. I came here to this country to do my master's at Columbia University in sustainability management, which was a program for 1.5 years. And I was surrounded with like-minded people that had the same goal of finding solutions to the problems that we have in today's world. And after I graduated and I got my first job and I started working with real estate owners, multifamily building owners, and I was very disappointed that they were not as committed to sustainability as I was, because my first interaction with New York City residents was the people that I met in school, and I couldn't comprehend how everybody really didn't care it as much as we did in school. So it took some time of adjustment for me to understand how can I communicate my message, my sustainability wording, and how can I get to their minds and make them commit to changes. And I noticed that money is a good conversation starter. And then also being able to show, even though we care for different things, our ultimate goal, if it is the same thing, reducing energy and water consumption, I didn't care it as much that they would commit to do that. And then I noticed using tools like legislation, as we mentioned, is a great way to convince people to make change. So I found persistence to be the key to drive change, as well as communication and education. And I found that it's an African proverb that my running local community adds to every single long-run emails they send. It goes like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go further, go together. And I think anything related to sustainability, any problems we have, we cannot solve it on our own. We need our community, like these events where we come together and brainstorm on the solutions. I think that's the key.
Probably a laundry list of things that we've tried and failed, and I think that's exactly what needs to happen. Because sustainability isn't this big thing that we need to be thinking about all the time. I mean, yes, it is, but it starts with just paying attention to something. And the other day, someone told me something about my search engine being Ecosia, and it's like, oh my God, you're such a, it's your brand, right? But it is just this thoughtfulness that goes into anything that you do, and it's the smallest change, and it's okay if it doesn't work. And I think you just have to let it impact you and keep it in the back of your mind until you figure it out. In COVID, we closed one restaurant, and we, at that point, had a really incredible micro-hauling system, and there were so many challenges. And it felt like we went back in time in terms of sustainability, because we were all so accustomed to using to-go and bags everywhere. And it just, there's so much fear of reusable, which is what you use in a restaurant. And I think it's just, we have to reel back and come back to it and think about, well, quart containers are not sustainable, but also what can they be made out of? How do we think of these things rather than a failure, but as this challenge to reinvent things and make it better than it was before?
I have one more question that I'm going to ask here, but I wanted to open the floor. Does anyone have any other questions or thoughts or dirty jokes?
No jokes, sorry. I wanted to ask about the role of media in helping to affect these changes, and possibly also the role of media in keeping the status quo. My background is in restaurants, and I'm very proud of that. But I've recently kind of transitioned into a career in media, and one of the things I've noticed, especially in the drinks media, is that it has a tendency to be very like horny and like aroused by an idea, but not necessarily wanting to have a relationship with that idea. So you'll get a sustainability issue that comes out, and then for the rest of the year, it's like, who gives a shit? So I was kind of curious to hear how you all think that media can do better to further the cause, but not just by covering it. You know, I always think about the way that media has changed the way we think about harassment in restaurants. Like the power of what these exposés have done in the restaurant world to raise awareness and to, you know, kind of dethrone bad actors. There is, you know, clearly proof that it can be good. So I just wondered if you have any like concrete ideas about how the media can help. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I've noticed that people often sort of interview me or our team at Lighthouse about the sustainability efforts, and that does not tend to send many diners our way. People are much more interested in an oozing egg and a watermelon radish looking kind of something, right? Like where the press thinks that it's an interesting story, and it definitely hits hard on a Climate Week or anything like that, but it's not the thing that really drives consumers in. So it's always a challenge to kind of balance wanting to make this something really intriguing and interesting that does drive consumers, but also wanting to just be a popular restaurant. And how do you talk about the meaningful work that you're doing, but also allowing people to just come in and have a good dinner and get away from their day and the climate anxiety that we're all experiencing from hearing all the bad news. It's like everything else. It has so much complexity, right? And so it should be this fun thing where you come in and have a cocktail and a delicious food, and you're having a conversation with the bartender and a vibe and everything that comes with it. And I think it's important to make it cool so that people want to come there and that they want to engage with that because of everything else that you're doing. At Lighthouse, we have on the back of the menu just a little story about what we do and the farmers that we work with and the initiative. So if you turn your menu, there's a little bit of information there. And when we talk to the media, we obviously, I mean, we're always approached for that reason. It's never about, oh my God, what dishes do you have for brunch, right? And there's such a dichotomy when you look at what the media coverage is. There are all the new hotspots that have $28 cocktail, and they're really buzzing and fizzy, and there's a beautiful hostess in the stand, and everything's just right. And then there are like little stories. And I think it's just about the consumers and making these stories sexy. And it just takes time. And it's really something that I think, you know, from in the 13 years of operation, I'm seeing a change. I'm seeing that there is a lot more interest in it, which is great. And it's important to make sure that that is considered cool. That it's not like a weird, hippie, quirky, funny thing that someone's doing, that is the new normal, that is just the baseline, that people are getting paid weight, that you are thoughtful about all these things, and then that's cool. That it's cool to think about the future and treat people well and be transparent.
So from a media perspective, and I say this because I also am a media person, you're right, the conversation about sustainability is horny. The response is flaccid. It's so disappointing because they'll talk about it, and then what I find is no one holds anyone's feet to the fire. I was on a panel last week for 750 with one of the top, with the CEO of one of the top 4 conglomerates on the planet, and he was super scripted and evasive in some of his answers, and I was sitting there wishing somebody would just call him out on his bullshit. So as media, I'm asking you, when you get to talk to these people, call them out on their bullshit. Do not accept soft PR prepared answers. Make sure people know, like, y'all depend on media for folks to know about your products. You want us to say good stuff? Here's the thing about writers that I say all the time. You can't tell writers to say good stuff or bad stuff. We're just going to describe you. So be good, because we'll describe you.
Yeah, I had a thought when you were talking about media, about social media. And I think it kind of goes along too with what Nama was saying about what's cool, right? Like, what do we see that's cool? It's cool to treat your employees well. It's cool to not harass each other at work. It's cool to like stand up for your, the person who you're working with who's maybe being harassed. Those are the things, the changes that we could make. Or it's cool to be recycling or whatever. But I think that it's also a quick way to feed incorrect information out there too. So it's something to kind of be cautious about. I live in Southern California, and I remember a few years ago, there was a gentleman who really thought that he had the answer to, burning your ice at the end of the night. His whole thing was, put your ice outside in your plants, because then it'll melt through the night and you'll be watering your plants and all of this stuff. And he was ranting and raving on there like, if you're not doing this, you're full of shit, and just whatever. He was really angry about it, but he kept pushing that. And the bottom line is, in California, a lot of the plants outside are succulents, and the one way you can kill them is with ice. And so it was just a bad piece of information. And so there's that too, where you can harness social media for the right things, but you can also harness it and be putting out a lot of misinformation. I think there's also a lot in media right now, like, man, the first season of the TV show The Bear, that guy was up for all these Emmys or whatever, and it was all in this comedy actor category, and I kept thinking, this show is a comedy? It should come with a trigger warning. Like, what? And we wanted to do on our blog a story about The Bear from real chefs, real people in the industry, and we couldn't find one chef that would agree to watch the whole season and talk to us about it, because it was that triggering, and that kind of conversation where it's like, yeah, I mean, this is a real look at what happens inside of a restaurant, but maybe we should be having a bigger picture about the harassment here, about what it is to throw a printer across the room at your coworker, or to have two chefs walk out in the middle of a shift. Like, that is a real conversation that is also about sustainability. We're talking about hiring practices and keeping people on. And I think one of the things that we don't think about in restaurants is that it's such a transient workplace that you a lot of times are pulling someone in to like stop the gap of not having somebody there. But instead, if you could change your mind and look at it in your hiring practices as though, I want this person with me for the rest of their life. How are they going to be with me forever? How are they going to retire from here? How are we going to work? How am I going to never lose this hire? It's a completely different way of thinking about how you treat people at work.
So I have a question that kind of ties these things together, like how we're talking about who we are, who we actually are, how we tie that into staffing. I think anyone who's running a program now knows that we're experiencing a very unique kind of labor shortage, which is that we have a lot of new entrants to the workplace who, frankly, have much higher and really appropriate standards for how they expect to be treated in the workplace, how much work they expect to put in for their paycheck. And with a lot of these sustainability issues, in addition to dollar cost of initial investments and the payback on that, and labor cost of implementing these systems, Nama always talks about systems are the answer. What are the steps that you take when you're implementing a new change that has a labor cost associated with it, and your team is going to need to pick that up? What are the tools that you use in setting culture, the tools that you use in developing systems, the tools that you use in education that get buy-in from your team to execute this like cool new idea that we learned about at a seminar, or this cool thing that we read about?
We're all looking at Nama.
You pay for it, right? Like if you have a new staff member and they don't know things as well, and it takes them longer to pick things up, then you either invest that time or you pay your team to invest that time in making sure that they come along with everyone else. We bought an industrial composter, and there's going to be a team member that will have to feed it. It has to have, it's like a little baby. You have to feed it 3 times a day and whatnot. Someone is going to get paid to do just that. So it's an investment. These things are an investment, and I think when you, again, are investing in your team and they know that you care for them, then they're also willing to invest that with you, right? So it's not super costly on either side. You're not expecting free labor, but also they're there to work with you on something and make sure that it succeeds. And by that, meaning the cost premium of trying to do that thing together and the learning curve that it takes to figure it out is shared on both sides.
If nobody else has any questions, I think I might wrap it with one last one. You want to go, Josh? Go ahead.
So kind of tying in a lot of, actually the last couple of questions, what kind of tools would you guys use to fight against disinformation as well as promoting education? Just because I've always felt that the most important thing in food and beverage for me has always kind of been education. Like what is the next thing? What can we learn to improve on what we're doing and how to get there? So utilizing media and again, how would you fight against that disinformation that we know that there is a lot of, the same way that, Jackie was talking about calling people out on their bullshit and really finding a way to get the right answers together?
So, and I was going to mention this when we started talking about media. I haven't found a way to fight disinformation yet in terms of, for example, I have a co-founder, so I've founded this business with someone else, but oftentimes I'll do the interviews and the title will be like, this girl started glass recycling all on her own, whatever the sexiest tagline for them is what they're going to use oftentimes. And me trying to fight that has never been fruitful. But what I have found to be useful is flooding social media or the media with true stories and with, educational components. And the easiest way we've been able to do that, with which we've touched on a little bit, is making things sexy, making recycling cool. I think we were maybe one of the first recycling companies on TikTok in 2020. And so bringing an industry that seems boring, such as recycling, even more so recycling glass. It's like a little niche, it's a little random, but bringing that to TikTok and showing people how we recycle glass in New Orleans then gives other people, the confidence to go and see how recycling is done in New York City or how it's done in California. Like, oh, I had never thought of that. What's happening to my glass? Is my glass being recycled at my bar or restaurant? X, Y, Z. And so I think for me, the thing I found to be most successful is more flooding the media with true educational and informative solutions and stories, as opposed to trying to fight the disinformation, which I haven't figured out how to do yet.
So I'm gonna back up what she's saying. Like, this is Brooklyn, show and prove, but it's got to be a top-down thing. My mom used to say, "Don't wrestle with pigs; you both get dirty." To which I would tell her, "I don't wrestle with my food." You cannot beat these people who are playing a disinformation game. All you can do is fight with truth. So you have to lead by example. You have to get out there and show how it's done instead of talking about how it's done. And if you show how it's done, you don't have to argue with the people who are putting this disinformation out there. You're putting out truth. The people who are looking for truth are going to find you. And you'll have given them examples they can follow that are practical, they can put into use. And you can't drown out the noise, but you can just divert your attention to other places.
I'll say for us, it's not the misinformation, but the lack of information and education. We work with building operators, restaurant operators, when it comes to energy efficiency, educating people how they can reduce energy consumption and how they can operate their spaces in a more energy and water efficient way is the key. There are, as you may already know, New York City is one of the cities that is committed to sustainability the most. The city has the 80 by 50 goals, reducing its greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2050. And 70% of the city's emissions come from the buildings. So when that's the case, legislation and local laws have been targeting buildings, large buildings, and now starting next year, they will be required to reduce their if you own a building or if you are part of a building that is larger than 25,000 square feet, you will have to reduce your emissions by the set limit starting next year. And once every 5 years, it will incrementally get more stringent, and come 2050, it will be net zero for those buildings. Wow. So educating and collaborating in terms of how to get there to net zero will be the key.
Sure.
So how do you make education sexy?
Yeah.
If the whole point is that we're fighting disinformation by just showing the truth, how do we make that education sexy? How do we get to a point where everybody is actually looking for the right answers instead of just the answers that are in front of them?
Sometimes we just set up tables and just say, come and talk to us. What do you want to learn? And what are your questions in terms of how you can make your space more energy efficient? And it's just like taking that time, carving out that time, and being readily available for people.
We make TikToks and Reels. I mean, we utilize social media to the best of our ability in making recycling fun and cool as you can make it, and partnering with brands and showing people that I keep using Tails just because we all worked on that together. Attending a conference is like you can show the side of the story that is where your trash goes from that conference, and that can be fun and cool. People love behind the scenes stuff. And so just utilizing whatever you can to the best of your ability and putting that on social media and making it short.
Also, it is easier to expose how ugly lies are than to make truth look cool. People tend to not pay attention to true things until it's too ugly to ignore. Make the truth ugly. Don't sugarcoat it. And then if people are given a choice between the truth and lies, they may choose truth if they can see how ugly the lies are.
I have a super fast one.
You're next, Aurelio. Go ahead. No, go ahead, and then we'll bring it up here.
Understood, and thank you.
Yeah.
I feel lucky to be in a community of people in our industry that cares about sustainability and wants to contribute to a better world for the next generation and so on and so forth. And also a member of a community of people that wants to contribute, doesn't always know how, right? Which is a lot of what we talked about today. It struck me recently that there's like a shelf in my home that is increasingly filled up with like cups and mugs and things like that are intended to supplant single-use plastics and things like that, and be a benefit to my household and to my day-to-day operation. But ultimately, it's kind of causing more of a problem, not helping. And so I'm curious if there's one or two things that we are all doing, all of us are doing with the best of intentions that is actually counterproductive to our shared goal of becoming more sustainable.
Go ahead.
I think a big one, and I was just talking to some people about this over lunch, is these silver bullet solutions, these like blanket things that sometimes we say. And I'll take my own industry, for example, glass. A lot of people are often say, oh, glass is the most sustainable material that you can use. When in reality, 3 years ago, the entire state of Louisiana had no glass recycling. That is not sustainable. It's one-time use glass. And when it's the heaviest material, that does not make any sense. And so I think something that we're doing a lot as a community is making these blanket statements about sustainability and how to be more sustainable in your everyday life, when in reality it needs to be localized, community-oriented solutions that are different everywhere. And I think to the last point, the issue with that is not the sexiest and the coolest thing to say. When someone says, oh, what's the most sustainable material? And you say, it depends. That's just like not that exciting. And so I think we just need to come to terms with that sustainability isn't always sexy, and that we have to have local solutions and understand what's the most sustainable option locally.
You want to ask a quick question?
Wait.
Oh, go ahead.
Less brand swag.
Oh.
How much swag do you throw out every freaking year? One of the things that big brands can do, and y'all are bartenders, you can press them on this, stop creating garbage that we're not going to ever use. Take that money, spend it. Like, again, that's looking at your bottom line, telling me what's important. What's important to you is your swag, you're not helping anybody. Stop making crap, as the big brands do, and take those funds and distribute it somewhere else. Put it somewhere else in your P&L sheet.
It's funny that you say that, because we put a lot of that thought into this swag here today. That's why you have 2 books and a notebook, something you can use today, something you can take with you and use, with a sustainably made bag, and the notebooks are recycled paper. But we were very careful not to shove a bunch of T-shirts and bottle openers and stuff in there as well. Just the things you can use.
Yeah, so more than a question, when he was asking about how you can use media to maximize and be sustainable, I feel like now is the time to be unique. Sometimes you go to TikTok and you see like videos that are like so like nonsense and so weird, and you watch like 20 of them.
Yeah.
And then you questioning them, But the thing is like, it's our things that even they are so bizarre, it's things that we have never seen before. So we need to use that on our advantage. An advantage instead of going to like somewhere else bar and because they're doing a milk punch with like banana leaf, I have to do one because they were a succeed. No, they were a hit because they were the first one who did that idea. You work in something creative to make you on, and then you're gonna have that attention. The problem here is like the bartending community should be a place to find support to then give customers what they want. Not how I feel like have become lately, when it's more about like bragging between one and the other. Oh, I'm doing this and I'm doing that, instead of like find that support between one another and then give all that power and all that polish and knowledge to the customers that actually pay, and allow sustainability to go a long way from our own perspective and what we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. All right. Last question, and then I'm going to ask one thing. And then I have one more, Travis, after that. So,
okay, I'm kind of an optimist, and so I thought like maybe because sustainability can be like very heavy and depressing, I would ask an optimistic question. Obviously, it can be very expensive and very taxing and very, Wild West. Like, what are we doing? How do we make this more sustainable? In your different businesses, and I heard you kind of mention it in different places, are there money-making or money-saving opportunities in sustainability that help move your business or your agenda forward, or interest people who don't think of themselves as interested in sustainability?
We used to use reusable straws. That is no longer the case. So that was one thing that, sort of was successful and then failed. In general, I would say we haven't figured out how to, for the most part, make it cheaper, right? It is a cost premium to do all the things that we have been doing. I'm hoping that this composting machine is going to prove a very successful, both financially and saving, and kind of like, again, pulling the community around it and using it as a new model for New York City organics collection. And kind of like what Amanda mentioned earlier, being able to hold on to our staff. So that has been probably one of the biggest investments that we made that has a huge return, both emotionally and spiritually and financially and so forth. And our real commitment, and why you hear me say systems all the time, is because I believe that the way to do that financially, in a financially stable way, is to create new systems. When we opened the restaurant, there was zero sustainable infrastructure. There was only one waste stream. There was not really anything truly compostable, in the sense that you can have something, but then the lining is plastic. And I can go in a whole deep hole about why the reality is what it is. But what we need is systematic change, and this is what we're looking to do, is to have these conversations, to bring some transparency into this field, and to over time be able to scale these initiatives. We need new materials, we need new waste systems, we need renewable energy. There's so many places that there is just big change that needs to happen, and the only way to get there is by coming together, making that demand, and that is, again, cultural through our guests and customers. Some of it is legislation and just really moving budgets around for what really matters to us as people, and in working together with other businesses and making those investments locally.
So my company's called Glass Half Full, so I'm an optimist for sure. And I think I keep hearing this narrative that sustainability is more expensive, when I think in reality, at its core, sustainability is much cheaper. I have a bit in my life that's like, am I being sustainable or am I just broke? I just keep reusing the same things over and over again until they're completely broken. And so for us as a company, the way we save bars money sometimes is that glass is the heaviest waste stream. And so a lot of times when we can divert that glass, they will save money on their waste costs because it's generally on a per pound basis. One other example is that there's a new restaurant in New Orleans called Plates, and all of their plates are thrifted from various different areas, and they made it their whole thing, and it's all different plates. Our first employee shirts we got from Goodwill and sewed a patch on. That was much cheaper than buying from Custom Ink. I think at its core, sustainability is generally the cheaper option and can be. We just have to be creative about it and then turn that into a story. Make that a TikTok, a reel, and make it a part of your ethos. And I think collectively we can do that and get rid of this narrative that sustainability is always more expensive.
Okay, I have one last question. No more questions. I'm sorry?
I've been asked to deliver the last question from all of us out here.
No, I have the last. What? Oh, okay.
It was clear that you were so intentional about what you put in these bags today so that we're avoiding the swag trap. If the folks who chose the books could share what was so meaningful about those books to them and what they're excited for us to take away from them when we take them home and read them ourselves, that would be great.
Why don't we start with Nama, since we've had Kelsey already talk about her book today. And we are about to go to a happy hour. So if we do not get to your questions in this next couple of questions here, you're going to have plenty of time to speak to all of these experts during happy hour. But go ahead, Nama.
I'm so happy that this question was asked because it also kind of explains why I am an optimist. The book is called Cradle to Cradle, and I call it my sustainability Bible. Before we opened the restaurant, my brother and I came upon a documentary and then immediately read the book, and it changed the way we do things forever. In our house, in our home, it's a spiritual and a guide and just an incredible point of view where it's this very holistic approach to sustainability. It is about making sure that the human spirit is alive and thriving in everything that you do. It is about the energy, the soil, the air, the creativity. And it is just this wonderful approach where everyone's winning. And creating a truly better world for everyone. And it sounds so impossible, But William McDonough, for president of the world every day, all the time, just what an amazing person, what an amazing perspective. And this is why 13 years later, I still love what I do. I still believe in everything that we do. We had Donald Trump as a president, and here I am still talking about sustainability. I believe this is possible, and the point of view in that book is just so contagious. You just want to do something really, really special with everything that they teach you in that book, how to do and how to think about it.
Kelsey.
For folks that didn't hear me speak about it earlier, the other book in that wonderful little grab bag is Sandor Katz's Art of Fermentation, and I believe this to be kind of the Bible for fermentation. There's everything that you could possibly need if you're starting, if you're well into it, and kind of even if you're tweaking a recipe, years down the road. It's just like one of the pieces that I use in day-to-day life and when I'm fermenting. So, yeah, I hope you enjoy it.
Fantastic. Yeah. I hope you guys enjoy both of those books. They were obviously very carefully chosen by two wonderful experts that we have here today. And I'm personally very excited about both of them. Okay, so I have one last question. This question was actually submitted by Travis. So I'm just going to read it here. So it's a little bit of a long question. But what do you say to people who have been recycling their whole life, conscious about where they spend their money, buying local and sustainable, they're composting, they're doing all the things, and they see new oil drilling facilities getting approved, eco-regulations being rolled back, and corporations ending or cutting back on sustainability initiatives? In other words, how do you stay hopeful, and why does it matter in the face of the seeming futility of your actions?
So I don't do hope, and I'm not an optimist. I'm a student of history, and if you are black and you live in America, you have to know that there was never a reason to believe that things were going to get better. When Africans were enslaved, there was no precedent for freeing yourself from enslavement. When they were free from slaves and they had to face Jim Crow laws, there was no precedent to keep themselves from being hanged. When this country decided that separate but equal was the way we were going to go, there was no precedent for going, nah, that's not actually equal. There's no precedent for what we're trying to do. And I do not ascribe to hope. Because when you lose hope, you will lose everything. When you lose faith, you lose everything. I subscribe to volition. Get the shit done. It might not happen in your lifetime, and you have to commit to the process. I get to do what I do, not because I'm the smartest or most talented member of my family. By far, I am not. There are so many people in my ancestral line who had so much talent and had to spend their time fighting other battles. Like, I'm not at the moment trying to keep anyone from trying to hang me, and that is useful. Forget positivity. Forget altruism. Decide that the future is going to change. Commit to the process, accept the fact that it might not change in your lifetime, and then fucking fight to change it until you stop breathing. That's all you can do.
I totally agree with him. I don't know how to follow that.
I was going to say, who wants to follow? No, I feel like you guys want to end on that note? Okay. Sounds good. Thank you, Jackie. Before we head over to our happy hour, I just want to say some final thank yous. Obviously, Pernod Ricard, thank you very much for everything today, and Bar World of Tomorrow and Bar Smarts. And this has been a real team effort to bring this together, and we're so excited to see the next step, the next phase, the applications for that 50K coming in, just to see where your creative juices are and how that's flowing for you guys. I'd like to thank all of our speakers today, Camila Giger, Haresh Bhajwani, Kelsey Ramage, Nama Tamir, Jackie Summers, Francisca Troutman, Eja Erzos. I also would like to thank all of the support staff today and the team from Rule of Thirds. This was amazing, Rule of Thirds. And all of you guys for showing up today. Thank you for coming on a rainy Monday to participate in such an important conversation about our future. And another big thanks to the family that's been showing up to our rallies month after month. Let's keep that momentum going. So at happy hour, we're going to have some great cocktails from some of our BFFs. Kelsey Ramage is going to be serving a cocktail from Trash Collective. We have Felix Crittenden from Brick and Cute Ass Bar. They're going to be serving a cocktail, and they're a really good one to talk to about community organizing, community sustainability, what that has to do with your sustainability projects that you're thinking of. And we wouldn't be really a rally for tomorrow if we didn't have something from Lighthouse. So Lighthouse has a zero-waste espresso martini on their menu. It's being made today with Absolute Vodka, which is made at the most sustainable distillery in the world. The only waste or byproduct that they produce there is clean water. So please go enjoy and make a friend. Thanks, guys.